So let's focus on demographic data, all right? If you want, you can go to page 30 for more examples, but these are some of the highlights taking out of Bernhardt. We have the number of students in school, the number of students with special needs, the number of ELL students, age and or grade of students in each cohort. Please define for me what's a cohort. Who wants to tell me what a cohort is so we know what we're talking about? How does New York State, oh go ahead, Karen, tell me what a cohort is.
I believe it's the grade you entered that you're supposed to graduate with, even if you don't graduate on time.
Very true. You do with your eyebrows what I do. I'll refine it just a bit. New York State defines a cohort as the students who entered 9th grade all at the same time. That's a high school cohort. And then Karen's right. Whether they graduate on time or not, they remain in the cohort. Now, you elementary folks, how would you define, I don't know, a kindergarten cohort? What's a kindergarten cohort? Elementary folks, how would you define an elementary cohort? I'm going to start calling names. Sarah Horton, give it a shot. What would a kindergarten cohort be defined as?
So a kindergarten cohort, so that would be like, sorry, my camera's been cutting in and out, audio's been cutting in and out. So cohort is like your class of students, correct? So kindergarten would be all of the students in kindergarten, a specific year.
Yeah, very good. And we could define like they do high school, and you would remain in that cohort throughout your K through 6 time in school, regardless of whether you were retained or not. We could use that definition, right? Or we could say a 3rd grade cohort is a students who enter 3rd grade and that's it. They're a cohort for 40 weeks and that's it. So we have formal definitions like Albany, which Karen correctly noted, or we have informal definitions of a cohort. All right, but we have to make sure we define our terms in conversation. All right. So the age and or grade of students in each cohort, the socioeconomic level of students. Shayna, how do we in New York State typically define socioeconomic levels? What indicator do we use to define poverty?
Isn't it normally the percentage of students who are receiving free and reduced lunch?
You got it, my friend. Thank you very much. There are other indicators, I suppose. You're going to take a look in the future at some demographic factors that could be construed as defining poverty. We'll see if they're valid. But as Shayna said correctly, the most obvious and most oft-used indicator is free and reduced lunch. All right. Teacher and student attendance, ethnicities, races, religious beliefs of students and teachers, number of graduates and dropouts, number of teachers by years of experience and assignments. If you take a look at page 30, which I'm going to do right now, oh my goodness, the list is so big, which of course raises an important question. Who would be so crazy as to go out and collect all of that data? You'd be foolish to try. But what Bernhardt does recommend is that you sit in your teams and ask some essential questions during your planning to plan stage. All right, what data is important? That's one of the first things we have to decide. What do we want to look at? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And what data might inform that those possible solutions? Let's just go over quickly. I'll give you some tips here. Don't worry about the slide for a moment. I want to tell you about a couple of things here. For community and school district data, there's something a lot of people don't know about. I want to share this with you. Whenever your school district decides to have a capital project, you typically have to borrow because no one's got those millions of dollars laying around, correct? So you have capital improvement projects, you have a public referendum, you're given permission to borrow. Now, in New York City, the banks who will buy your bonds, in other words, they buy your bonds, you get money, and basically they're giving you a loan. They don't know anything about us. They don't know things about you. So there's something that's filed with every bond sale, and that's something called the official statement. And the official statement is assembled by your attorneys. It's an official document. It includes information about the size of the district, when it was merged, the square miles, the businesses in town, the recreational facilities, the post-secondary colleges and universities, et cetera, et cetera. It's a profile of your district. You might be wise to get your hands on that. You'll find it typically either in the basement, in the dead files, or in your superintendent's office or your business office. The official statement, your superintendent may have no idea what it is. Your business official may not know what it is. But if you're looking for information about your district, the official statement that goes along with your bond sale contains all of that information. Other things. All that school data, description of history, attendance area, location, type of school, grants and awards, the state designations, all of that, extracurricular activities, be honest with you, that's not in one place. You can't go to a book or a spreadsheet. You have to assemble that. If you're a principal and you plan on sticking around, you'll create, notice the word, structures around this, where you're constantly updating this, or have a method in place that means that you'll get your hands on this when you need it. So don't think that between pages 30 and 31, you'll be able to get your hands on this all at the same time. But as far as having a good cookbook approach to give you ideas, so you're meeting now with your team, and you're asking the question, what data do we need? I recommend don't ask open-ended questions like that with people, because like when I ask you open-ended questions and I get that look, you'll get that same look from your faculty. Give them something to react to. Give them these pages. And they'll look through these pages and say, here's the cookbook approach. Okay, we do need this, 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 and this. Or maybe what you would do is you would use these pages to create a survey and ask people just to check the boxes. Then when you get them to check the boxes, what's nice about checking boxes when you have to report out, Jerry Lee?
Then you can look at a total picture of all the data and compare it.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can start to quantify it, right, Jerry Lee? You can find the 5 most choices, the 5 least choices, the average choices. You add things together and subtract them. Exactly. So it's good. I mean, you could use this to come up with a survey for your building or for a team and ask them, what data do you think we need? That's why I keep referring to this as a cookbook. Don't get rid of this book. I'm going to be buried with this book. All right, I'm going to use it to light the fire underneath my carcass. Other places to look for data. The U.S. National Center for Educational Statistics. This would be for grant writers. Those of you who might be in special programs, director of special programs, you're writing grants, you're going to want to use the U.S. National Center for Educational Statistics. I didn't put here, and I don't know why I didn't put the Census Bureau. That's well, because I talk about educational demographic data. I'm sorry. So educational demographic data, yes, the Center for Educational Statistics. The New York State Education Department has a lot of your data. Your superintendent's office has the BEDS data. Who knows what BEDS stands for? BEDS, let me get a BEDS person. Kobe, BEDS. All right.
I do not
Scott,
know.
BEDS.
I have to say that I do not know. Basic educational data.
You read Tanya's clip.
Tanya's good.
Good girl, Tanya.
As a principal, I do beds all the time, and I had no idea what the acronym was for.
Exactly, which is why I picked on you, because you're a good sport. Yeah. Scott is sick of beds because he does it all the time, and then he has to chase after faculty who don't fill it out right. But basic educational data systems, every October, the first week of October, it's all done digitally now, but when I was in your positions, we would get these green and pink bubble sheets, and we would distribute the pink sheets to all the administrative personnel, and the green sheets to all the teaching personnel, and they would fill in their information, their educational background, the number of courses they're teaching, the number of students in their courses. But what you don't know, what you don't see, is that BEDS is collecting all kinds of other information as well. How many books in your library? How many computers you have in the school? How many different types of rooms, et cetera, et cetera. So BEDS, Basic Educational Data Systems, is where Albany collects all this basic educational data about schools, and then it is pushed from your offices to the portal. The portal is a secure place where Albany sends and receives data from school districts. Your superintendent is the person who, by designation, manages your portal, and then he or she designates certain tasks into the portal. That's where the BEDS data goes. You can get a lot of this data that we're talking about in these pages from BEDS. Your business office has a lot of data, especially financial data, fiscal data. If it's a good business office, it has a running database of data. I used to keep all that myself because, again, small school super, you wear a lot of hats. I had, obviously, all kinds of budget information that I kept adding to every year. That was a structure, another one of those structures that you put in place so that you're not starting from scratch each time you have to do something. So I would just add the new year, 2019-2020 school year, onto my spreadsheet, and then just put the data in for each one, and I just have a longitudinal graph. Budgets, tax levies, tax rates, reserves, all of that, all in one place. Your Chief Information Officer, are any of you a CIO in your district? Pauline, I think I see you moving there, but I don't see your face. Are you? Oh, there you are. Okay. Yeah. Can you get that? I'm sorry, Pauline, to keep bugging you about this, but can you get that camera on your face? Very good. I'm such a stickler for this. I want to make sure people are with me. I get so insecure if you leave me. All right. No one's a Chief Information Officer, CIO. Every district is required to have a CIO. Chief Information Officer is the one who, again, assembles and pushes the data, student learning data, achievement data in particular, pushes that up to Albany, actually pushes it to the regional information centers, the RICs, and the RICs then push it up to Albany. So your Chief Information Officer interfaces on a regular basis with your student management system. What's a student management system? Scott?
Ours is, we utilize eSchool, place where one-stop shop where all the information is.
Give me 5 big examples of what's in there.
Of eSchool? Oh, 5. There's everything. You go from the students' family background, their registration process, their records for registration, their transcripts, their attendance, their health information, anything you can think about a student, it is in there.
Excellent. I bring it up, Scott, because we're going to be talking in the future about systems, technology systems, and at the building level, your student management system, emphasis on the word system, is the backbone of your technology systems. Of course, in the business office, they have their fiscal management software. In the special education, who's a special education geek out there? Special ed people? Hand up. Sarah and Shana, what do you use to manage your special education students? Sarah, you first.
My current district uses ClearTrack. My previous district used IEP Direct.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Shana, what do you use?
We use IEP Direct.
Very good. Does IEP Direct talk to your student management system? Are they compliant?
Do you mean like where they keep all the information on the students for school?
Well, if a new student comes in the building, Shana, and they register in an elementary school, and that elementary secretary or someone adds that student information into your student management system, does it have to be entered second another time if the student is a special ed student?
Yeah, it does need to, and there unfortunately have been cases where they were not sure that the student had an IEP and have had to either not really get in trouble, but I guess make up services that the student lost.
Oh, not good. I'm sorry to be critical, Shana. I asked the question because you want, I'm gonna go ahead a bit. You want your systems to talk to each other so that you're not duplicating effort. We're going to talk later about how your student management system talks to your transportation software, which talks to your school lunch software, which talks to your health software, which talks to your special education software. Do we still call that SIP compliant? Anybody? Tanya, you're one of my go-to techies. What does SIP compliant mean? Tanya, no?
Are you
All right,
saying SIP? Are you saying SIP?
Yeah, when I was in the business, someone Google SIFF compliant, and then break in SIF compliant. Tanya, you can do that for us. SIFF compliant. Back to the screen. Your Office of Special Programs, like your special education office, it'll have a lot of data on students because they have their own management systems. Ideally, we want them to talk to each other, right, Shannon? But if they don't, you should work towards that. I was going to ask Sarah that same question, but she's gone now. Your building main office will have data. Your main office secretary, because she's typically the one who is handling the student management system, and your guidance office will have information too. A lot of testing information in your guidance office at the secondary level that does not get shipped off to Albany. Tanya, you got it? There's no such thing?
Well, there's different types of SIF. SIF, and it's SIF, SIFF, correct?
Yeah?
SIF. I have home of SIF Cinema, Seattle International Film Festival. Hold on, let me narrow that scope down.
Never mind. Well, let me just give you the definition that the RIC in our region would use for it. Whenever we were shopping for software, and this wasn't so long ago, this is what, up to 2014, one of the big questions that we would ask is it SIF compliant? And if it were, that means that the databases, regardless of the developer, had used these SIF protocols to write their databases, and so the databases could talk to each other. You had to give the databases instructions to make that happen, but if you had a SIF compliant new software, it would talk to the other SIF compliant software. Sarah, does your special education software talk to your student management system?
You know, I think so. You're able to, I guess I don't know about how it's inputted, if it's automatically inputted, but there's like a puzzle piece on School Tool, which is what we use, and you're able to click on it, which automatically opens ClearTrack for you to sign it, put your password in, and view like
There you go. There you go. There you go. To stay with this topic, thanks, Sarah. Imagine if you had student management system, transportation management system to keep track of the students and where the routes are, If you had a point of sales in the cafeteria for students just to have a swipe card and get their meals, if the nurse had confidential information that was not appropriate for the student management system, but it was HIPAA protected, and she kept a database of student health information. And lastly, if special education department had a database of all students and their programs and their accommodations, imagine if these things were not talking to each other. So a new student enters the district, or there's a change of address or change of contact information. If they're not talking to each other, you'd have to do that how many times? 6 different times? Imagine the mess you'd encounter. So that's where SIF compliance comes in. That's what we talk about, a technology system where everything is talking to everything else. All right, let's get on with this. What time is it now? 5:55. Talked about the National Center for Educational Statistics. You can go here at your leisure. If you need it, bookmark it. You might find a need to go here. If you're trying to find out where your particular district or region compares to others nationally, if you were trying to make a case as to why you need extra dollars to do X, Y, or Z. We had the New York State Education Department, typically known as the place where we would get school report card data. But within here is all kinds of demographic data as well. Let me see hands up, no question, but let me see hands up. Who has visited the New York State School Report Card site? Okay, the majority of you have. That's good. That background will be important as we move through this lesson, all right? All right, let's just do some exercises here. Pauline, I'm going to come to you. Pauline, I want you to look at this chart here. This is demographic data. This is on page 33. If you can't see it on the screen, take a moment, Pauline, and tell me what this graph is telling us. What story is it telling?
Can you hear me? I
Yeah.
don't have my book in front of me, and what I'm looking at, I can hardly see it. Really is, so
All
I
right.
can't be sure.
How about that?
All right. It is talking about student enrollment.
Very good. Where?
Somewhere Valley School District.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the
Yeah.
school district, right? Very good. And for what period?
From 2003, 2004 to
right, very good.
2012. Yeah.
Very good. I asked those specific questions because I'm going to be stressing now and forever how important it is to identify what's in your charts and graphs so that people don't make any assumptions. Now we're going to go to a little bit, well, let me ask this question of, Jesse, back to Pauline's accurate description of what we're looking at. What's it telling us in particular? There's one story that it's telling. What is that, Jesse?
Can you zoom in a little bit more?
A little. It's going to be a little fuzzy, but what can you tell me?
It's showing that the enrollment is declining.
Very good. So basically, we're telling a story here about the information, enrollment is declining, and if you take a look up a little further up top, you can't read it, I'll read it for you. This is where Bernhardt is trying to get you into the habit of using this data. So she talks about the look-fors, which are increasing, steady, or decreasing enrollment. Jesse and Pauline noted decreasing enrollment. And then here's the important, this is what answers the question, okay, now what do we do with the data? She talks about the planning implications. Is there a need to expand or decrease district school facilities, services, and or staff? are enrollment changes congruent with community population changes? Granted, it leads to more questions, but that's the nature of this continuous school improvement beast. You have to ask questions before you can formulate answers. And that's why she talks to you about the planning implications. When she walks you through the steps in the planning process, she talks about implications. Let me now ask, Yolanda, I'm going to give you some time with this one, and Kobe. You don't have to respond right away. But Yolanda, Yolanda, you're going to answer me the question, what exactly are we looking at? Just what we're looking at, the data. And Kobe, even though it's on the board there, talk to us about what you see for implications, all right? So Yolanda, when you're ready, tell us what you see on the screen. What story is being told here? And be sure to unmute, Yolanda, when you're ready.
So it looks like we're looking at the population that's in the school compared to the community population.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
Very good. Stay with it because, yeah, now we're looking at somewhere elementary school, same period of time. Not implications yet, Tanya, but, I'm sorry, Yolanda, but what do you see in terms of, what story is the data telling us? Here, I'll make it a little bit bigger for you. It might be hard to see.
Well, yeah. Oh, wait, let me see. Increase in study or decrease in enrollment? It's not steady for the most part.
It's not steady, right? We've got some blips there.
Down, then it's up, then it's down again.
Does it make you want to ask a question about 0304 and 0405?
Yeah, why is it so? What happened between those two times? Because it dropped.
Exactly. And again, we don't have answers, do we, Yolanda? But it does lead to more probing questions. And so if we were working, like I'm working with you now, Yolanda, you might say to me, well, check what happened between 04 and 05. And you might say, I need more data.
Yeah.
Which would be exactly the right question to ask. Unfortunately, I mean, we'd have to go out, or we might brainstorm right there, people who know about the district, and find out, well, I don't know, a business left an important business maybe pulled out of the district, Yolanda, meaning that the parents took kids out of school. Maybe there was a catastrophe and in a part of the district, and that, like Love Canal back in the 70s here in Western New York. Love Canal was a heavily populated residential district up in the Tonawanda region, and then they found contaminants there, and everybody was shipped out of Love Canal region. That could be another example. So it makes you want to ask more questions, right, Yolanda?
Yeah, so in the book, I know it says if you don't like, after coming up with your demographic data and everything, if you don't like the story that it tells, then change it. And I was trying to figure out, how exactly can you do that, and what part of the process, and if can you actually do it? So, but I guess this just answered my question, how it was actually done.
Yeah, although I think she might be asking a different question. We kind of got around it in the earlier classes. If you don't like the fact that so many of our children are born without good dental care, they don't have good dental care, I mean, that might be a demographic. Somehow you found out that children don't have good dental care because they're poor. Well, you could do something about that by contacting SUNY at Buffalo and having their dental van come out once a year to your school district and provide a free and reduced price dental care for children on an annual basis. That'd be a way to change the demographics immediately, might it not, Yolanda?
Yeah. Is that in the process part?
Yeah, exactly. Good question. Through our processes, through our planning, through our problem solving, we can change the demographics. So we do have some control over those inputs, don't we? But you're right. Through our processes, we change inputs. Thanks, Yolanda. Good job. Kobe, now what are the implications of this kind of a trend in enrollment?
I would say the implication is from year to year, you're going to have a level of uncertainty either way, whether it's your enrollment declines like it did from 2003 to the 2004 school year, or if it goes up, from 06, 07 to 07, 08, it went up from 486 to 529, but that's still a level of uncertainty. Okay, what are we going to do with this influx of kids, and what's going to happen the following year? Like, if you bring someone on, how long are they going to be with you? And then just looking at the data as a whole from 03, 04 to 12, 13, that number dipped significantly. It dips down to 458, which is only 13 more than 04, 05. So what happened?
Exactly. Good analysis, Kobe. Let me ask a pointed question about a hypothetical. What would be the implications for professional development in your school district if you noticed dramatically increasing enrollment? What are the implications for professional development if you see dramatically increasing enrollment? Just on PD.
Classroom management.
Who said that? Scott? All right, Scott. Expand.
Pardon me?
You said classroom management. I asked what would be the implications on PD, professional development.
Obviously,
expand. Your answer is correct. Expand it.
With increasing student enrollment, the district's not going to jump at, we had 58 students enroll, so now I'm going to hire some new staff. They're going to do what they naturally do to try to stay fiscally sound. And hey, the class sizes are now going up from 22 to 28 or whatever it may be. And the expectation is you're still going to have classroom management to have successful, engaging instruction. The staff would need some PD to help them with that, I think.
Excellent. Excellent. Notice Scott framed my question a little more tightly, which is fine. He said that we probably couldn't afford to bring on extra teachers, which would mean class sizes might go up, leading to discipline problems. He gave a very good analysis of that type of a situation. Let me change it just a little bit. Let's say that you were having such a dramatic increase in enrollment that you had to add new staff. So in a situation where you had to add new staff, what might be the implications, Tanya, for PD if you had to add new teachers?
Well, I would think if you're adding new staff, obviously there would probably be professional learning centered on team building and trust building and relationship building. Also, if you look at the increasing population, if you were to dig a little deeper, I'd have to ask, where these students are from, the languages that they spoke, and wonder if there's going to be a need for professional learning to support the individual needs of these students with, differences in terms of learning style, and if students have IEPs and so forth.
Exactly. And that could run the gamut. So you're bringing on, say, 15 new teachers, and you're engaged in 15 different initiatives in the district, all of which your other teachers were trained in. We're so bad at this. At the state, BOCES, and local level. We bring on new people, and they're entering the stream, and they don't get training. They don't know what has been done. And if you brought in 15 new staff members, all of those different instructional strategies, curriculum management tools, someone mentioned mentoring, Kobe mentioned mentoring, all of that would have, your rules and procedures in your district would all have to be done over again. Danielle, comment, please.
I know in my district we do like a full year of new teacher training, they call it, and it's actually with like the 6 other districts around us, and it goes through our local BOCES. The only thing I disliked about it, well, not the only thing, but what I disliked about it when I was going through it a few years ago was that it was kind of like a year-long grad class that met once a month. It wasn't like district specified. It didn't give me like protocols and the ins and the outs. It was like very theory and like, you know, it touched on classroom management and stuff, but it was just a long grad class, and I felt like it was a waste of time. I would have been better off in the classroom, you know, teaching.
Yeah. That's a common refrain from so many good teachers, the fact that their time is spent doing things that they're wondering, why am I going through this? Because leadership doesn't follow through.
Yeah, it was kind of like if you didn't know the information that was being presented to you, then you probably shouldn't have this job. Like, tell me the stuff I don't know.
Yeah. So thank you, Danielle. Now, the reason I ask these questions and why we're looking at this, we'll look at one more in a moment, because this is a good example, and the question I asked makes the point. If we look at the data, we can predict the things that are going to happen to us. And demographic data in particular, if we look at demographic data, we can predict challenges that we're going to respond to, we will have the need to respond to. All right, one more, and I think, I don't know who have been Karen, I want to pull you into this one, Shayna, and again, Jerry Lee. I think I need 3 people for this one. Here's the next one. I want to know, so Jerry Lee, if you answer the question, Jerry Lee, here's what we will do it. Jerry Lee, tell me just what you're looking at with the first figure, F-3, exactly what you're seeing. I think I said Shayna. Shayna, tell me what you see in the second pie chart. Karen, tell me what you see in the third pie chart. What story is being told? And then I want to hear from anyone who wants to raise their hand and take on the challenge. What are the implications here? What do you see here? So Jerry Lee, I'll make it bigger. If you can't see it in your book, this is on page 35. And by the way, folks, please have your books ready for you, because as you can see, these screenshots are sometimes, they get pretty fuzzy, and you need to have your book with you in class. So, Jerry Lee, the first pie chart, figure F3, what are we looking at here, Jerry Lee?
The first pie chart is a breakdown of student enrollment by ethnicity for the entire Somewhere Valley School District.
Exactly. And what do we notice in particular? What generalities can we conclude here?
Majority of the population, more than half, is Caucasian, and then about 26% is Hispanic. So those are the 2 major ethnicities present in the district.
Very good. And I'll add too that we're looking at 1 year's worth of data right here, right?
Yep.
Certainly. Imagine if we tried to look at 13 years worth, like the previous slide. Oh my goodness. And I bring that point up because when you're creating charts and graphs to present to staff or boards of education or parents, you're going to be you have to make a lot of decisions about things like colors and the form, what type of shape the graph takes, how much data to put in a graph. You spend more time doing that than actually generating the data sometimes. One of the students in the last class correctly said to me, well, Chuck, I can't tell what the other ethnicities are because the colors are too similar. Well, that's true, isn't it? All different shades of gray and black, which is why I mentioned the colors that you choose makes a big difference in communicating your message. Jerry Lee, thank you for that. I always think you have a bright idea, Jerry Lee, because you've got that star over your head there. Like you got bright ideas going off. All right, Karen. Well, no, it was Shayna. Shayna, please, what do you see in the second pie chart?
So the second pie chart is the same information as the first, but it's without the elementary school. So if you're looking at just the upper levels, you can see the percent ethnicity by enrollment, and the numbers haven't changed that much, although there's a little bit less Caucasian students and a little bit more Hispanic students.
And tell me again, what level of enrollment are we looking at?
Just without the elementary school.
Is that true?
Isn't it all the elementary numbers minus one school?
Exactly. Scott, notice, Shayna? Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. The purpose for it is to have you take a look and make the point how important it is to make sure that you are looking at what you think you're looking at. So yeah, we're looking at the elementary enrollment now, without somewhere elementary.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Shayna. Thank you, Scott. Which gets us to Karen. When you look at the last pie chart, what are we looking at here, Karen?
We're only looking at the one elementary school, which has 458 students, and of that, 75% are Hispanic.
Exactly. And so, anyone who cares to tackle this, what picture do these three charts, these three pie charts in particular, tell us? What's the picture here, the big picture?
The one elementary school is located in part of the district that has a large Hispanic population.
Exactly, which oftentimes happens, especially if your schools are community schools, which draw students from a particular segment of the community. I doubt. Well, some schools do this. I knew a district that bused its Native American children all to one school and made those numbers kind of lopsided. But yeah, here we have probably a community school where now at a much greater percentage, like 50% more of the students are Hispanic as compared to the district, which is a matter. This is a matter of disaggregating demographic data, isn't it? If we look just at the first pie chart, it's disaggregated. One might say, well, this is quite a white community here, and only 25% of the students are Hispanic, which would not be a true picture at all once we disaggregate the data and recognize that we have a very large Hispanic population in one particular school. Implications would be what, my friends, for that one building in particular?
You're going to want some elementary school teachers that are bilingual, as well as potentially administrators.
Exactly. And so PD that might be addressed to the entire school, right? The entire district, Jesse, might not be the best PD for that particular building. And as Jesse noted, we might want to recruit differently for that school as well when we had openings, right? Placing more of an emphasis on bilingual competencies amongst our teachers. So again, the demographics tell a story. They raise more questions, but by raising good questions and then being able to provide answers, we can predict the circumstances that we're going to, and the challenges that we're going to have to address in a district or a building. That's this whole point in this exercise at 617. Ooh. So Bernhardt gives you a cookie cutter recipe for analyzing demographic data. And you've probably been through this before. This is a cliche, this is a generalization, but this is how it works in our schools and businesses these days. If you are wanting to analyze demographic data, back to the question, okay, now we've got this data, now what do we do with it? This is what you do with it. You meet to determine what data, well, you meet at first to determine what data are important, then create a data profile. By the way, is the word data singular or plural? Someone give me, huh? Singular or plural? Do we say data is or data are? Amanda says plural. Jerry Lee says plural. For those of you who took Latin, if it's plural, what would be the singular form of the noun data?
Data.
Type it in. Anybody got it? Because you're right, gals, it is plural. So our noun-verb agreement has to be data are. I know, which is why I bring it up, Danielle, because so many people say it wrong. Just like media. Media is nothing. The media are. I took Latin, 2 years of Latin in high school. The singular form is datum, D-A-T-U-M. The singular of media is, as you know, medium. And so you have to have, when you're writing or speaking, you want to make sure that you sound like you know what you're doing. I try to sound like I'm doing whenever I get the opportunity. It's a lost cause, but that's why I said data are, so that you might make sure that you notice that. I know it doesn't sound right, but it's the English language. It is what it is. It is what it are, Danielle. The next step, after you know what your data is, that you're going to let people independently review the data, looking for strengths, challenges, and implications. And is different data needed? It's good to give it to them alone, all right? Don't give it to them an hour before the meeting. This is where your management skills come in. Don't give it to them 2 weeks before the meeting. Give it to them maybe 2 or 3 days before the meeting. You don't want them to be checking with their neighbors and asking, what do you think? You want their perceptions, and you want them to think about it quickly and give you their first impression, all right? So give it to them a couple days in advance. Tell them what you're going to do with it too. Prep them. Be a good teacher. Prepare for the next quote-unquote lesson. Then, after they go over independently, then convene small group reviews for the same as the above, all right? Look for challenges, strengths, and implications, and ask, is different data needed? Then you're going to keep building. Then you're going to have the large group getting together, all right? You can do small group and large group in one meeting. You could do independent small group and large group in one meeting. You could make that happen, all right? Depends on how much time you've got. That's valid. But then you're looking for, again, these implications, these commonalities, for bottom line, for student learning, perception, school processes, all right? That's the first thing you do with the data. Implications. Notice we're not coming up with any answers here. Take your time. We always want to get to the end. We're Americans. We want to get to the end. Give me the results. Show me the stuff. What do you got? Teachers are notorious for doing that. So are principals. What do you want me to do with this? Give me the end. What's it all mean? I don't want to have to think. I'm in this workshop so I can drink coffee and spend a day not having to discipline kids. That's not what it's about. You can make it a fun exercise as well. There are good people out there who will help you with this. If you don't already know this, your BOCES are set up to help you specifically on school improvement processes. That's what they do. Granted, some do it better than others, but you're not alone. If you're fortunate, you've got a large enough school district where you have someone who specializes in this, maybe an assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction or professional development or whatever, and they're good at this, they've had training, you're not alone. You can delegate this to someone else. And as the principal, you can be the detached leader who's just one of many who's offering his or her opinion. Play it how it makes sense to you, but this is the first step of what you do when you're analyzing demographic data. I want to talk quickly about data disaggregation. We've talked about it here, but separation of data into different subgroups that make up a population. All right? If we looked at student learning results and found that the majority of students, we had 5 elementary buildings, but when we looked at the district, we found that we were proficient. And then we looked further, we disaggregated just at the building level and found that that was true of 4 of the 5 buildings. But when we disaggregated by building, we noticed, oh, that's not true. So whereas 75% of our students are proficient at levels 3 and 4, at the district level, when we disaggregated by building, we found one of our buildings with a high concentration, say, of poor children was much less than that, only 40%. That's one very general, broad way of disaggregating. But we can disaggregate even further by subgroups. Tell me, a hand up. Give me some of the more popular, or well, actually type it in. Type in for me some of the more popular subgroups or the most important subgroups that we ought to disaggregate around when looking at student achievement data. Type it into the chat room. This is beneficial to disaggregate student learning, school processes, and perceptions across different demographic characteristics. Okay, the responses are coming in now. Yes, Yolanda, ELL. Amanda, ELL special ed, exactly. There's more, aren't they? Aren't there? Come on, my friends, put on your thinking caps. Don't make me call on you. Good, Tanya, gifted and talented. Ethnicity, Jessica, good. These days, I don't really know any longer. We should say racial and ethnic. Ethnic, to me, kind of means Italian and Polish. Racial would mean Caucasian, African American, etc. Oh, it doesn't matter. Yep. Pre-introduced lunches, exactly. Economic standing. We're missing one more very obvious one. Venus and Mars. Sarah, gender. Scott Zip, male and female. Yeah. And we're going to talk later about multiple disaggregations, because we might want to know how our poor Caucasian males in special ed perform on examinations. That's quite a deep dive. And in many districts, you probably only have 3 students that satisfy that criteria. But in large districts, that's not the case. You might find all kinds of people that do. So this helps us understand if we're meeting the needs of all students. Again, back in the 80s, 90s, when I was coming up, we never disaggregated. We didn't look at it. We looked at one number. How did our students do? And that's what we paid attention to. How unfair to all those subgroups of children. You're much better prepared than that. All right, switching gears at 6:26. See, we're just going to finish this up. We won't get to any demonstration. Let's talk about student learning data. That was all demographic data, my long-winded presentation on demographic data. Now let's look at student learning data, which you're most familiar with. This requires a synthesis of student learning data in all subject areas, disaggregated by student demographic groups, by teachers, by grade levels, by following the same group of students, the cohort, over time, as well as looking at individual student growth. Let's be honest. This is where Bernhardt gets a little pie in the sky. There's no way that you're going to be able to do, even in a school year, synthesize all learning data by all subject areas and all demographic groups. It can't be done. It's just too much. So this is, again, where you meet in your planning groups and you ask critical questions. Where do we want to focus our attention during this first stage? All right? It might take a month, it might make 2 months, it might take 2 years, but you need a plan. Before, when you talked to me, when we talked about why things aren't done with data, because administrators don't create comprehensive plans around how they're going to move this forward. They don't have a cookbook to do it. That's why you've got it all in front of you. And you've got it, well, we talk too much about administrative turnover. That's a real problem in our schools these days. We need that consistency, and we don't have it. So that's student learning data. We want to know what students know, what do they not know, are there disparities between student groups, and are we meeting the needs of all students? When in the scope and sequence, I mentioned a video that I'm requiring you to watch. That's the video that I'm referring to here. It's a video made a couple years ago of Denny Atkinson, who was a director of the data. We work for the data warehouse here in the Western New York Regional Information Center. Denny takes us into a deep dive into the deep levels of student learning data that we can get our hands on these days. People like Karen probably gets her hands on this data. Karen, are you allowed into the data warehouse?
I've been in the data warehouse before, but no, I don't have access this year, but I've been in there.
But you've been in there. I asked the question because it's protected. It's confidential. You can't get in. You can't get there from here. But what Denny does is he takes us from the public school report card data through other public data bases that you're allowed to look at, and then finally into the protected databases that only people with passwords can get into. And it's that last very deep dive where people do most of the work with their data teams. The public information I would use as a superintendent with a school board or with the public in an annual meeting when I'm giving the state of the school address. But when Karen's meeting with teachers doing data team work, she's digging down into the data warehouse, and she's looking at the standards. She's looking at the test questions that assess the standard. She's looking at the student responses to those test questions to see how many students answered correctly, how many students answered wrong. And she's also comparing that to statewide results and other normed results so that she can see how her kids are doing. And then answer the question, so what do we do with the data? Jumping ahead a little bit, but what Karen does is Karen looks to see where we have a lot of students underperforming on any particular test item. She checks to see what standard is linked to those test questions or questions. Then she leads her team through an analysis of their curriculum to see if there's good alignment vertically and horizontally between grade levels, all right, vertically, K through 6, and then within grade levels, horizontally, within the 4th grade alone, to see if those standards are in the curriculum, where they need to be. And then, because she's excellent at this, she takes it one more step, and she passes it over to Scott and asks Scott to make sure that these things are being covered in the classroom, which is why her job is better than Scott's job. Scott's got to go in and see, are they doing it? And if he's a smart man, and he is, he'll question teachers about these weak areas. And he'll check their lesson plans, or when he does a walk by, a drive-through, he'll check to see if they're doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to be doing it. And even better, if you've got formative assessments in place, you'll check to see if a topic is being addressed in the classroom and in the curriculum ahead of time, so that you can actually address those errors and those holes and those gaps before the final exam, before the state exam. That's how it works. That's how we make it work. That's how we move from compliance to CSI. That's everything Albany wants us to do, but we're doing it as part of the continuous school improvement process. We're using our heads and data and technology to make good decisions. So the video is going to discuss that. Go to page 53 for a quick scan. Types of student learning data. Just the 3 biggies right now. We have diagnostic assessments. These are the ones that your school psychologist will give, or if any of you are still giving aptitude tests. All right. These would be, well, that's not a good example. Diagnostic assessment is a form of pre-assessment that allows a teacher to determine students' individual strengths, weaknesses, knowledge, and skills prior to instruction. You're diagnosing where the students are. Examples: error analysis of literacy, progress monitoring data, phonics inventory, reading miscue analysis, etc., etc. It's an analysis of student work, all right, before you apply the treatment, which is your instruction, all right? Then we have the next biggie, formative assessments. This refers to a wide variety of methods that teachers use to conduct in-process evaluations of student comprehension, learning needs, other academic progress during a lesson, unit, or course. For old timers like me, we did this. We called it a unit test, a chapter test, or we might just ask questions during class about the last chapter we covered or the last skill we taught to see how students did. And for those who don't like the term formative assessment, use terminology they're accustomed to. All right? Call it a unit test. Call it a chapter test, maybe a 10-week test, all right? These are your examples. It's 6:34. I'm going to move ahead. I'm going to do a little bit faster. Finally, we have our summative assessments. This is where you evaluate student learning at the end of an instructional unit by comparing them against some standard or benchmark. Summative assessments are often high stakes, which means that they have a high point value. Our midterm exams, our final project, our state assessments. All right, so these are the big three. By the way, in that video that I mentioned that you're not required to watch, but that I put in a folder which you should have received a note. By the way, let me ask that question. Let me finish the point, then finish ask the question. I spend more time on these topics, types of assessments. Let me ask a quick question. Before class, I created that share folder where I put the video that I created for the other class about the measures of student learning. Did anyone get a notice in your email address saying that that was available to you? Okay, you did. Good. All right, so you know that that's where I put it. Very good. Thank you for that. That was my formative assessment. Took me seconds. Now I don't have to, I monitored, so I don't need to adjust. Good for me. How about locations for student learning data? Well, typically, again, you could go to that National Center for Educational Statistics. Yes, you could go there for that as well. But we're most likely going to be looking at the New York State report card, which we will next week. You're going to go to your guidance office because your guidance office is typically the black hole, especially the secondary level, where all written exams copies are kept. All right, they're bundled up and they're put away for 7 years or longer until the student graduates. I think after they graduate, you have to keep them for 2 or 3 years. All right, so you'll find a lot of information in the guidance office. In your special education office, you'll find student learning data. Your chief information officer will have, they'll have report card data well in advance of Albany spitting it back to you. So if you want to get your hands on it in time for summer staff development, go to your chief information officer who has that grades 3 through 8 ELA and math data. He or she has that information because she's pushed it up to the BOCES already, to the RIC, and you can get your hands on it before Albany spits it back to you. Or you could go to your compensatory remedial teachers. They'll give you diagnostic data, they'll give you RTI data, they'll give you Ames Web data, iReady data. You could get that from them as well. All right? All right. I want to show you here what your assignment is going to look like. You recall, by the way? Let's look at the assignment first. Well, let me. Yeah. Oh, geez, I still got to get through perceptions data. I better hurry this up, Chuck. Forget that. I'll get the assignment in a moment. But this is what you're going to be doing. All right. I'm showing you this because you need to know how to use Excel. This is a screenshot of an Excel spreadsheet where I have put together, back in when I was doing this on the job, New York State ELA 2014 proficiency results for grade 3. Real important when you're setting up structures and systems that you properly label your databases so that you know what you're looking at. So when you come to it next year, it's just a matter of filling in the blanks. In this case, I've disaggregated around advantaged and disadvantaged and by racial backgrounds or ethnic backgrounds as well. That's what it looks like on my spreadsheet. When I simply press another button, it turns into my chart. Here's my information. Again, I've labeled my chart. These are the things I'll be looking for when you give me your assignment. Did you properly label it? Here's what it is, 14 ELA results for grade 3. Here's what it is, performing at levels 3 and 4. So I'm talking about proficiency. Here's my advantaged and disadvantaged groups. I've used differentiating colors to show Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, and multiracial backgrounds. However, I could change it. You can look at it in a different way. And depending upon your audience, you might want to look at it this way. This is the same information. Same information as this. Now I'm looking at it differently. Here's my advantage and disadvantage, just 2 colors. And along the horizontal axis, I'm showing my subgroups. Let me see hands up. Does this tell a clearer picture? Or does this? This is like the eye test. Do you like this slide first? Better? Who likes this slide better? All right. Or do you like this slide better? All right. It seems this slide is easier to read. This is why when you're a principal or you're a superintendent, you've got to look at these things and say, what's going to be easier to look at? From the back of the room in a public setting, who will be able to see it? Is my text big enough? Will it be showing up on the screen? These are decisions that you have to make, and I'm going to run you through this in the assignment. All right? Here's another way of looking at it. Before we were looking at 1 year's worth of data. Now I'm looking at 3 years. I want to try to give the board a temporal perspective over time. Still looking at advantage and disadvantage. Still the same subgroups, but I'm looking at, and still the results for grade 3. But I can make this work too. A little busier, obviously. But I've got the 3 years, advantage and disadvantage. Obviously, when I was working this on the job, I had concluded that this was the best way to look at 3 years worth of data. But you've got to play around with it. Excel will give you that opportunity. You need to know how to do this because this is how you communicate to your staff. All right, I'm going to quickly go through this perceptions data as well. This is the 4th type. We did demographic data. We did student, well, actually, we've got 2 more to do. We just did demographic and student learning at 6:41. Oh my goodness. Get going, Chuck. This is a view, judgment, or appraisal formed in the mind of about a particular matter. Shorthand. This is what people believe and feel about how you do business. This is their perceptions. It may not represent truth. However, when it comes to perceptions, in the mind of the individual, perceptions are truth. So it matters a lot. Perceptions data are important to continuous school improvement because they can tell us what students, staff, and parents are thinking about the learning organization and how do we do business. This question is answered through assist the school's culture, climate, and organization processes. Let's look at how you create and use perceptions surveys. They're difficult. Don't take this on lightly because you could, if you don't create a good one, you'll be wasting a lot of your time and other people's time. You need to determine the purpose. What do you want to learn? How will you use the results? Really important question. Then determine the content. What content is desired and from whom? You might find yourself asking questions which you think make sense, but they don't. And you'll wind up getting answers that don't make any sense to you or don't answer the question. That's why professionals create these surveys. But I did find these days, when doing this for another class, that if you Google how to create good survey questions, you'll get a lot of good background and a lot of good ideas as to how to do it. So don't just go in this willy-nilly if you're going to put together a perception survey. Then you need to create your instrument. You need to pilot it and revise it as necessary. Notice pilot it. It's so important. Even if you just pilot it amongst a dozen teachers in your building. Do it with them or a dozen parents. You'll get the information you need to to make revisions, because you need to know, is the survey working the way you want it to? And then you've got to determine how will the survey be administered and when. Will you do it online? And if you do it online, and if it's a community survey, will you not get a lot of senior citizen responses? If you do it online, might there be pockets in your community that don't have a good internet access? Or might you leave out a segmented population that can't afford to have internet in their homes? You've got to ask those questions. How can the results be analyzed to show the information gleaned from the survey? How can the data be graphed and reported to effectively show the results? How and when are you going to share the results with stakeholders? And how can you use the results for CSI? All purposeful, meaningful questions. Don't rush through it. You've got the cookbook. It's in front of you. She's telling you exactly what to do. Now, I want to give you an example of perception surveys at 644. I think we can make this work. This is hard to see, but this is an example of the effective schools surveys, which I was brought up on, all right? Hard to see. Not real important except for me to tell you that it assesses school climate. It's for high school students and staff. And because they want to disaggregate the data, if you're going to disaggregate data from a survey, well, you're going to have to make sure that you ask people the right questions. Who are you? Are you staff? Are you students? Are you in the 9th grade, 10th, 11th, 12th? Are you male or female? If you're in the community, are you a parent of school-age children? Are you a taxpayer? Are you a non-taxpayer? Do you own business property? Are you a senior citizen? Are you between the ages of this and that? Are you male and female? You've got to ask those questions, otherwise you won't be able to disaggregate the information against these different subgroups, and it won't be as meaningful to you as it could be. You've got to describe or decide what type of a scale you're going to use. All right? Here, you can't see it, so I'm going to tell you quickly. They ask questions in this survey about safety and structure in the school, belonging and group membership, self-worth and ability to contribute, independence and control, closeness and good relationships, competency and mastery, and that's the last, I think the last. All right? So I needed to show a previous class what you would do with this data, these answers to these questions. So I took the questions, at least this amount of questions, overall school atmosphere feels safe, the overall school atmosphere feels caring, school staff members help students and are responsible for the behavior. All right, these are the questions that were asked. And I couldn't get my hands on actual results no matter how I tried, so I had to create my own results. And in this particular example, I disaggregated with not disadvantaged, in other words, advantaged children and disadvantaged children. And admittedly and stereotypically, and I apologize for that, but I made the stereotypical assumption that the disadvantaged children might not feel as connected to the school as the advantaged children. Why? Because the advantaged children were being taught by adults the same as them. And the disadvantaged children, stereotypically, were being taught by and disciplined by people who were not the same as them. All right? In this case, my high school had 940 students, 517 were advantaged, 423 were disadvantaged, meaning the free and reduced lunch price was about 45%. Now, if you were using this in an actual meeting, because to make it look how it needs to look, you'd have to first then break those answers into percentages, and I use a spreadsheet to do this, and here are my percentage of students who answered one question at a time. If I had too many questions, when I put the graphs together, it would just be too hard to look at. So one question at a time. Is the overall school atmosphere, does it feel safe? quickly, someone tell me here by looking at this one question, broken out between not disadvantaged and disadvantaged, what story does this tell, this one question tell about the perceptions between these two student subgroups?
The advantaged students feel much safer at school.
Yeah, that's the story that I was purposefully and stereotypically trying to tell, Jesse, that your advantaged students felt safer in school. Pardon me for spelling feels wrong. And I did that throughout with all of the questions, Jesse, in a previous class. For your purposes, I did this to be able to show you how you would administer a survey, collect the results, disaggregate the results, and then start telling a story in your data team meetings. But if you don't prepare it in a way that communicates something to your group, well, then it's all for naught. All right? And back to what you would do, how would you use it? Go back to demographic data and what she's prescribed, give it to people independently. And then look in small groups. What are the implications and the commonalities? And then in a large group, what's the consensus? Commonalities, implications, what additional data do we need? And then where do we want to go from here? Put it into your big data mix. Lastly, school process data, which is probably the bear out of the whole group. And we just have 10 minutes to get through it. Promise me that you'll stay with me. Please don't leave at 7. I think we can finish by that time, but let's try to wrap this up. School processes are the only measures over which we have control. We talked a lot about that. It's the programs. It's what we do. All right? School processes are important to CSI because they are what produce school and classroom results. I want you to go to this page so you can read it better. School processes examples. This is on page 82. You don't have to have a brainstorming session to ask people in your groups, what are our school processes? Here is a whole list of them. You could just tailor make them to your own circumstances. You've got your instructional processes all laid out for you. Your organizational processes, your administrative processes, your continuous school improvement processes, and all your programs, which are a bit different. Big brother, big sister, mentoring program, all right, et cetera, et cetera. Those are your programs. Let's also be honest, you can't review all of these. There's absolutely no way you could review all of these. But if you're meeting with your group and you're trying to put together your data profile and you recognize that school processes are important, work with them collaboratively to pare down the list to either one category or across the 5 categories, the top processes that you want to spend time going over. Go for the high results. And don't let this become so cumbersome that you don't use it. You don't have to do it all. And back to what I said before, you have help. You either have specialists in your district who can help you with it, or if you're a small district, you typically pay BOCES to give you that specialized capacity to make it work. All right? This is where you analyze your school processes. And what's nice, again, she tells you how to do it. You list the programs and processes being used in your schools and I'll adjust it, that you want to spend time looking at. Analyze the list of programs and processes. Analyze using the measuring programs and processes table. It's right here. It's in the book. It's on page 84. She helps you ask the critical questions. The purpose, the participants, implementation, and results. They're important to read. Under purpose, let's say that you take, all right, I'm deciding that I'm going to review, we collaborate, we decide the team is going to review instructional processes and a big one, curriculum, what we teach. And we could even drill deeper, right? 3rd grade ELA. Give the ELA teachers a task to go through this and ask the questions. What is the purpose of the program or process? All right. Let's say we have a curriculum. A curriculum? I'm going to put it this way. We have curriculum management software that we're using. A lot of people are using that these days. You might ask, what is the purpose of the program or process? How do we know that the purpose is being met? What are the outcomes? Who is the program process intended to serve? Who is being served and not being served? What would it look like when the program process is fully implemented? How is the implementation being measured? And to what degree is the program being implemented? It's all here for you, all right? You can't do it all. Don't feel guilty. But the point is not to suggest to you that you can do all of this that's in this book. But everything is here. You need to work collaboratively with, first of all, with your very intimate team of individuals. If you're building principal, that typically consists of, say, your assistant principal or your dean, your special ed director. You might have a lead teacher who's on your intimate team. Your guidance director is often there, or one of your counselors in elementary school. It's your most intimate team. It's an informal group of people. And you would start to work on this whole book with them. But your job is to know what's in here so that you can lead them through the forest, lead them through the woods. Notice the emphasis on the word lead. You have to go first. You can't expect them to, don't do this. We're going to have a study group, and this is going to be the book, and we're going to go through this and learn about this. Oh my God, you ought to be shot if you do that. This is for you to know. That's why this is in the graduate program at NU. But if you know what's in here, and then you can help lead them and sort them through to the important questions that need to be asked, and the important data, and the important processes, and important demographics, then they're going to start realizing there's success here. We're doing some stuff that really matters. And they're going to trust you more, and they're going to want you to stick around.